Now, from KELOLAND Media Group, a special presentation, KELOLAND's Hidden History, honoring Black history.
Welcome to a KELOLAND Media Group Hidden History Special.
In honor of Black History Month, we are taking a look at the impact African Americans have made in the United States.
From across the country to right here in South Dakota, we're learning the remarkable stories of men and women whose impact can still be felt today. But before we take a step back in time, we're looking at a man who's living his life for the future.
If you live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, you've probably met Vani Harari.
Harari's resume goes on, and he's done a little bit of everything. He says there's a reason for that, and he's showing young people of color there's no end to what someone can accomplish.
KELOLAND's Brady Mallory reports.
We know that when we look at our schools,
you never have to worry about hearing Vani Harari.
That the diversity is going to change in this community significantly over the next 10 to 15 years, and we have to be prepared for that.
If it's his podcast or anything else, he makes sure to turn up the volume.
I'm a product of other people, and so for me, like when I step out with pride, not just because I think I'm so special, but because I had teachers that were brilliant.
Harari is a teacher of sorts. As the co-founder of a company, Think 3D, he aims to help individuals and companies create their best selves.
Yeah, give it up for him. Now please show some love for my man on the sax right hand.
He's also an author, singer, and has served on diversity councils, human relations commissions. He's a public speaker, and above all, a creator. Harari says part of his drive comes from not seeing enough content created by people of color for people of color.
And for me, it's more about putting it there. And so it's not just us doing it, but it's also teaching other people how to do it.
Stepping into the spotlight and putting himself out there is easy. Harari says he grew up in a family of entertainers, and he put on a lot of plays as a kid.
You had to kind of work for your food almost, you know what I mean, where we always had to perform or something.
As an adult, he's channeling that energy into everything he does, because he noticed younger people are starving for role models.
It's important for them to understand that somebody went first so that they wouldn't have to go through some of the same things that I did.
Harari says Black historical figures and teachers of his own inspired him to do his best. That's why he says people who have a place at the table now need to step up and give back to their communities, not only to create diversity, but to normalize it.
That if we become that city of mentors, if we become that community where when you come here, we're going to put our arms around you, we're going to give you the skills to upward mobilize, to help other people do the same, what type of community will we have?
You never have to worry about seeing Vani Harari. He is one of the most visible community leaders in South Dakota. Whether you look at his books, teachings, message, or podcast, you'll find out he's trying to be a positive force for future generations. This man wants to make history, and he's making sure it doesn't stay hidden.
Leaders go first. They don't wait for other people to do the thing, and that's what it's about. It's about going first. It's about having a vision of how we see this community, how we see this world, and saying, what do we want to do about it? What imprint do we want to put on it? I'm not about life happening to me. I want to happen to life.
Now, if you're interested in Harari's book or podcast, we've included links for them under this story on KELOLAND.com.
A Sioux Falls man who helped break down barriers in the community was honored by the city this past year. June 30th was named Ed Washington Day. Washington was the city's first African-American firefighter in Sioux Falls. He joined the department on June 30th, 1975. Washington lost his battle with pancreatic cancer in May at the age of 68. The city of Sioux Falls also honored an iconic leader of the civil rights movement. On Martin Luther King Jr. Day this year, a sculpture was unveiled in his honor. Artist Porter Williams hopes it not only reminds people about King's visit, but also inspires everyone to do their part.
We can look back and see how far we've come, and to where we're at today, As one Black American, I'd like to say, we've come too far to go back now.
The life-size sculpture of Dr. King sits at Van Epps Park, near where he visited Sioux Falls nearly 60 years ago.
Well, just after the break, we introduce you to a name you might not have heard of in African-American history.
Harriet Tubman I know, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells I know, but I knew nothing of this incredible Susie Baker King Taylor.
How one woman is making it her mission to uncover the hidden history of Susie King Taylor next.
Well, she's one of the most famous heroines you've probably never heard of.
Although often overlooked, the contributions of Susie Baker King Taylor are undeniable. Kim Gusby takes a closer look at her life through the eyes of one woman determined to share her story.
For some, the search for knowledge leads to unlikely places.
I came here on this quest looking for something, but what I came looking for was looking for me too.
That is the case of Hermina Glass-Hill, a historian and writer who's made it her mission to elevate a story she says is seldom told, that of Susie Baker King Taylor.
Harriet Tubman I know, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells I know, but I knew nothing of this incredible Susie Baker King Taylor.
Born into slavery in Liberty County, Taylor made her mark as a Civil War laundress, freedom-fighting nurse, teacher, activist, and even author of her own autobiography. Incredible feats unheard of during a time when women and African Americans were marginalized.
She was a survivor. She went to Savannah at the age of 6 years old, and her grandmother, Dolly, who was a washerwoman between here and Savannah, had these connections. So she learned how to read at one of those secret schools in Savannah.
She utilized her knowledge to teach others, and by the age of 13, she escaped to freedom.
And my interest came when I began researching the United States colored troops. These are runaway men from southern plantations, free men from northern states who joined the Union Army in 1862 and fought for freedom and liberation of black people. And in that discovery, I discovered that there were black women who participated, and I stumbled upon her autobiography, which was published in 1902. And from there, this passion just grew. Before her introduction in that book, I knew nothing of her.
Glass-Hill is now on a mission to make sure everyone knows her name, so she's spearheading a campaign, speaking to area schools and traveling the country to bring more attention to Taylor's accomplishments. She even left her hometown of Atlanta last year to take up residence in Liberty County.
The more I read about her, the more intrigued I became. And so I came down here to speak last February for Black History Month. And in coming here, my husband and I went to the Isle of Wight where she was enslaved. She mentions that in her autobiography. And I just started to walk the path that she might have taken. And the more I walked, the more this spiritual presence came upon me and said, you should move to Midway.
The Isle of Wight is also where Glass-Hill finds inspiration. It's where Taylor is believed to have escaped to freedom, a major turning point that ultimately led to the liberation of others.
Her skills in the underground schools were used during the Civil War by the Union Army, and at that moment she became a teacher of hundreds of runaway children, men, women who were illiterate. And so if we look exponentially in terms of her influence, the hundreds of escaped slaves, runaways who learned how to read under her tutelage, and then they teaching their children, her influence is invaluable.
Now considered a premier scholar on Taylor's life, Glass-Hill spends much of her time on research, scouring documents, even searching through cemeteries.
Found some bakers in this area who are potentially related to her. I found a younger brother of Susie King Taylor at the Colonial Church less than a mile away.
And connecting the dots.
And Miss Susie, so that's 3 from the bottom, so I counted 3 from the bottom here. And it's April the 18th, 1879. The date of the marriage is April 20th, 1879. And by whom married J.T.H. Waite, minister of the gospel. And we know that J.T.H. Waite was one of the ministers of our church. And that's how the connection was made.
With the help of the local community, Glass-Hill has made a few other discoveries.
Susie King Taylor was a member of this church. Its antecedent was Midway Temple Presbyterian Church, which was located in the cemetery across the street. She was married. I have her marriage records. I have the location of where her mother was after the Civil War.
With every revelation, Glasshill says there's still mystery, but also an opportunity to learn and to grow.
This is really about remembering her story, remembering the horrors of slavery, and using all of this as a flashpoint for galvanizing the community around preservation of African American history, African American culture, African American historic sites.
And much like King Taylor, there are many other names who have made a big impact on U.S. history that you may have never heard.
And it dates back to even before this country was established. Tamara Scott takes us inside the Forgotten Soldier exhibit at the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown.
The idea behind the Forgotten Soldier exhibit is to shift your gaze. Curators like Kate Egner-Gruber say that was their idea when putting it together.
We're trying to tell a more complete story of the American Revolution. We're trying to tell stories that have been forgotten since the American Revolution and tell a more holistic, more complete story.
When you first walk in, you're greeted by a timeless photo of the Boston Massacre, but then your eyes are guided to Crispus Attucks, a man of mixed race who's believed to be the very first martyr. This theme continues as you move forward.
And I love that you walk into the gallery and you see these artifacts, and then you're immediately confronted with this plantation slave quarter landscape.
Paintings and rare documents highlight what the experience was for African Americans and the decisions they had to make.
Sometimes they're making choices given very little time, little information, and they just have to act very, very quickly, and then of course live with the consequences of whatever those choices are.
Gruber explained for many this option was alluring, but later would prove unfulfilling for most. Deeper into the exhibit, you'll see very important documents that describe what it meant for blacks when the war was said and done, and the British Army had lost, including a woman named Mary Perth.
Mary Perth, she's 43 and she's described as a stout wench. And you see here, again, that she came from John Willoughby in Norfolk, Virginia, and she left him 7 years ago.
Stories like this fill the gallery and disclose many names and faces that you may never have heard of before in history books. Gruber says you won't realize how much you need to know this until you're here.
We want our visitor to walk out of this gallery and take this new toolkit, this new idea of shifting the gaze into the permanent gallery, into other museums, and into their everyday life. We want our visitors to learn how to see things that they hadn't seen before, to look beyond the known and look into the unknown, and hopefully have a more complete understanding of our past.
Coming up, a look at the efforts to honor the heroic actions of a World War II medic.
Plus, how a Kansas woman blazed a trail for the future of women in meteorology. We'll be right back with Hidden History. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, a black Army medic corporal, Waverly Woodson Jr., saved hundreds of lives on Normandy's Omaha beach. Despite being injured himself, Woodson set up a medical aid station and for the next 30 hours worked to save lives. Woodson passed away in 2005, but as Washington correspondent, sorry, that was probably just good practice. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, a black Army medic corporal, Waverly Woodson Jr., saved hundreds of lives on Normandy's Omaha beach. Now, despite being injured himself, Woodson set up a medical aid station and for the next 30 hours worked to save lives. Woodson passed away in 2005, but as Washington correspondent Morgan Wright tells us, there's now an effort in Congress to award him the nation's highest award for heroism.
And he says many of them were frightened beyond speech. Joanne Woodson, the widow of Corporal Waverly Woodson Jr., reads the words of her late husband's personal eyewitness account of D-Day.
Dawn broke as our ship approached the battleships.
Corporal Woodson landed on Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. As a Black Army medic, he was wounded himself when a blast destroyed his boat.
This D-Day, Army prejudices took a back seat as far as the soldiers helping one another was concerned.
Corporal Woodson set up a medical aid station, and for 30 hours he removed bullets, cleaned wounds, and saved lives. Corporal Woodson never received the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions, despite the recommendations of his commanding officers. And then in 1973, his military records were destroyed by a fire in St. Louis. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen says that shouldn't matter.
Given the contemporaneous records of his heroism that were talked about in multiple newspapers at the time.
Van Hollen and the Congressional Black Caucus wrote a letter to Acting Secretary of the Army requesting a formal review to posthumously award the Medal of Honor.
This nation really needs to honor him in this way.
Despite no movement yet on the medal, Van Hollen and Woodson's widow hold on to hope that Woodson and other African Americans' heroism during World War II will one day be properly recognized. In Washington, Morgan Wright.
A Kansas woman paved an uncharted path for women of color in meteorology, becoming the first African-American woman to be an on-air meteorologist. Lisa Teachman, the chief meteorologist at our sister station in Wichita, Kansas, shares her story.
I'm June Bacon-Bursey, meteorologist from the National Weather Service.
She had a dream that became a legacy, all stirred up from the Kansas wind.
Because it's going to be very dangerous out there in 45-mile-per-hour winds.
She always loved the atmosphere. We grew up with weather balloons.
Raised in Wichita, June Bacon-Bursey would graduate from Friends University before earning her master's degree at UCLA.
My mom was very focused on making sure we knew our roots. Wichita was home base to my mom.
Daughter Dale St. Clair says her heritage was just as important as the future she was paving for meteorologists and women of color.
From her perspective, she had the skills and the clear path from an intellectual curiosity to pursue a path that had not been paved before.
Already, cold air is still barreling down in the midsection of our country, triggering off a lot of snow up here in the western lakes.
She started her TV career in Buffalo, New York as a reporter. But when the weather forecaster at her station was arrested for robbing a bank, she agreed to take the meteorologist's job. She'd go on to become the first woman and African American to be awarded the American Meteorological Society Seal of Approval for excellence in television weathercasting.
Weekend weather with June Bacon-Bursey bears the seal of approval of the American Meteorological Society.
Her career included working at NOAA, the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, and the National Weather Service, all at a time when men greatly outweighed women in scientific fields.
She was obviously the only woman in most of her classes. She faced, I think, more issues with her gender than her race.
She was an integral part of emerging technology.
It's going to be a completely automated weather service office composed of television screens, a computer, and keyboards.
Even as she had to defend her own education and knowledge.
My mom was always about definitions. So when she was called a weather girl, she would smile and say how proud she was to be a meteorologist or something in the context that would incorporate exactly who she was, utilizing the word meteorologist.
Advancing the science of meteorology was a big goal of June's, particularly with women. That's what drew her to a network game show, winning $64,000.
Somehow she knew she was going to win something, but that was her vision of being able to start a scholarship for women in meteorology.
Bacon-Bursey's passion for sharing her knowledge was evident throughout her career, even helping to develop science books for school children when she was in her 70s, leaving a legacy that paved the way for so many to follow. In Wichita, Chief Meteorologist Lisa Teachman for Hidden History.
From the evolution of music to land conservation, next we find out how people are working to honor the impact African Americans have had and to keep the history alive. Groundwork done by African American soldiers in the 1800s helped ensure national parks
are here today.
Anthony Bailey reports from Yosemite National Park.
Our national parks are home to some of the most iconic views in the world.
When you look across here, you're seeing the South Fork of the Merced River. You're seeing the varying coniferous trees that we have here and deciduous trees.
National Park Ranger Shelton Johnson teaches visitors about Yosemite. Among the reenactments and talks he presents is the story of a group of African-American troops called the Buffalo Soldiers. Their name given by Native American fighters who hearken their hair to the crown of a buffalo.
If you could bring those soldiers back and put them right here again, it wouldn't look that much different than what they experienced themselves.
In 1866, the Army sent the group, which included Civil War veterans and other soldiers, to the wilderness we know as Wawona. The group was comprised of the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry.
So roads had to be built, hotels were built, lodging of various sorts were built, and they were all built for the convenience of visitors.
For the next several summers, a few hundred soldiers would camp in a tent city at the headquarters located in the A Loop of the Wawona campground.
Essentially, they were serving as some of the first park rangers anywhere in the world.
National parks were a new idea. Poaching and timber thieves were new to families accustomed to exploration and life in the Wild West.
So basically, they were providing a presence of discipline, a presence of authority, so that people knew that the park was under the command of these forces.
The national parks and park rangers would not be established until years later in 1916. The Buffalo Soldiers also left their mark in the area of conservation.
And on those slopes behind me, the Buffalo Soldiers actually built in 1904 an arboretum.
It is believed to be the first museum in the national park system. Although some contributions are gone, Ranger Johnson says that other connections are still very present.
The hat that I'm wearing on my head right now derives from the cavalry hats that were worn by U.S. Army troops both in Yosemite, Sequoia, and Yellowstone.
That history of the African-American contribution to the national parks is what Johnson is working to keep alive and inspire others.
We didn't just come along after this was set up. We were part of the setting up. We were part of the building of this idea.
Coming up next, we go on a tour of the National Museum of African American Music.
It's about time. We're ready.
And whether you're ready or not, the Broadway music scene is set to expand with new sights and new sound.
The perception nationally, I think, is that Nashville is just country music. And while we love country music, I think it's very important to touch base on all of the other musical genres that African Americans have helped to influence.
Tamar Smithers, Director of Education and Public Programs, says it's a story that needs to be told.
This is just a monumental project, and it's history that we're doing.
Through more than 1,400 artifacts, 7 galleries, a theater, and live music, the National Museum of African American Music will educate and celebrate the influence African Americans have made on America's music.
We're talking about R&B, hip-hop, soul, funk, jazz, gospel, and those are just a few of the genres that we will showcase and highlight in the museum.
Just a few out of more than 50 genres and subgenres of music.
We'll start with our Wade in the Water gallery. We'll have 7 galleries. We start with our Wade in the Water, which touches on gospel, spiritual music, and then go all the way up to modern day, which is rap.
Integrating history and interactive technology to bring musicians of the past into the present.
One of those interactives will be a DJ booth or a sound booth, and people will be able to actually battle each other and see who has the best lyrics.
But as Don Harden, the project manager, knows, all good things take time.
They had to get their contracts together, and sometimes it takes longer, and they had to clear out a lot of rock. And so we're following their lead.
And he is thrilled to be leading the way on this first-of-its-kind museum, set to open late summer or early fall.
Being that I'm a native of Nashville, it's extra important, it's extra special to see something come out of the ground like this.
The walls are taking shape on the 56,000 square foot facility, signifying an American soundtrack ready to be told.
None of them really tell the story like we're telling the story.
And you can find more stories celebrating Black History Month right now on KELOLAND.com.
Thank you for joining us.